Hi, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my craft room with another Heffy Doodle video. I have a fun slimline card today. I wanted to create an interactive card that would reveal a hidden sentiment. So let me get started with my coloring. There's just one little image today. I'm using this cute little fox from the Popping By Clear stamps. I am coloring it in with some like tan and orange colors to create a fun, bright little fox. I did leave in my coloring this time because I have just one image. So I just do some really basic coloring. I start with my darkest in where I believe shadows will be, and then I go to a medium tone to bring out that color, and then a light color to just cover everything, really blending it in as best as I can. For his face and ears, I stuck to 1 to 2 colors, nothing really extreme, and same with his nose. I also added little pink cheeks, and then I will also bring out a white gel pen just to add some small highlights throughout the image. Once I'm all done coloring, I'm going to grab out my little die cut machine and I will die cut out my fox. So I'm using some Heffy tape just to help keep that die in place while I run it through my machine, making sure to line it up as evenly as I can, and then I will die cut it out. I love this little tiny machine. It's perfect for little small dies like this. I'm just doing one and I don't have to die cut a lot right at this point, but I love having this next to me on my desk. So now that my little fox is done, I'm going to move on to creating my background. I'm going to be doing some distressing using some Oxide inks. I'm going to be making a slimline card. So this is currently cut to 9 by 4, and I will eventually cut it down with a die to fit on my slimline card. I'm bringing out a couple stencils. I have my Marvellous Mountain stencil as well as my Cloudy Sky stencil. Now the Cloudy Sky stencil does have some attachments, so I just use my small scissors to snip apart in between the stencil, so that way I can slide my paper through like I've done here with my mountain stencil. Now I wanted to create some green mountains because this is going to be more of a spring scene, but you can definitely distress these mountains in any color. You could also think of them maybe as just the tops of trees. I really like this cute little mountain stencil to create different types of scenes. So I went over and created 2 different layers in my mountains with Rustic Wilderness, and I used it darker on the bottom to create a little bit of dimension, and that way I can have 2 different mountain sets in the same color. Now I'm going to be using my Tumbled glass to create my sky in a blue cloudy sky. So first I'm starting with adding my mountain stencil to cover up what I have already previously distressed. And I thought about adding in my stencil now, but I thought I needed to add some blue first before I start making my clouds. So I'm going to add some of that Tumbled glass first over the mountain. And when I lay down my stencil, I leave a teensy tiny bit of green showing, so that way my blue will butt up against that green and there won't be a weird white line still showing in between the 2 different colors. Now I slid my cloudy stencil down and I can start adding more blue, and I do this 3 times, creating different layers of clouds. So my stencil is blocking where my clouds will be, and then I'm adding blue above the cloud. Once I'm happy with how that turned out, I'm going to grab the Slimline stencil from the Slimline Pull Tab dies, and I liked it in the lower right hand corner, so I'm going to go ahead and die cut that out. Here I have my background complete. Next, off camera, I already die cut all of the pieces from the hot air balloon dies. It's such a fun die set, and I'm going to go ahead and just quickly glue this off camera as well. There are lots of videos showing you how you can glue this together, so I'm just going to show you more of the technique and how I stabilize my balloon. So I cut a piece of acetate that would fit behind the basket and the balloon of this die set, and I'm using some double-sided adhesive on the basket and the balloon, and I'm going to adhere this piece of acetate behind it. And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to create more stabilization, as this is going to be the moving part on my Slimline Pull Tab. So this way the little basket wouldn't get snagged on anything. Not that it would, but I'm just worried about it being pulled up and down, and all that's connecting the basket to that balloon are those two little tiny die pieces. So adding that acetate means I won't block anything in my scene, and it just creates more stability in my die cuts. So now that everything is done and put together, I did use some thin foam squares to pop up my fox onto my balloon basket. I can start working on the interactive elements of this card. I'm pulling out the rest of the dies that I'm going to need from the Slimline Pull Tab die set. I'm pulling out the long piece that is the actual pull tab, the notch, the arrow die cut, the stabilizer piece, as well as the slot that I'm going to use for the actual movement of my card. So now using my grid mat, I'm going to die cut out the top notch. This will be centered to my card, so that's why I'm using my grid mat, to make sure that I have my notch as centered as possible. Bringing out that Heffy tape again to hold that die in place, and I will run it through my die cut machine. Now that I have where my notch is going to be, I need to figure out where to put my slot. I want to make sure that it will be covered as much as possible by the balloon. And I also need to make sure I leave room on the back side for my stabilizer. So I'm just using the die to help me find placement, and then again using my grid mat to help me center that slot as best as possible. Once I have where the slot's going to be, there's plenty of room for that stabilizer. It's as centered as I can get it. I'm going to grab my tape and hold that die in place and then run it through my die cut machine. Next, I will die cut the pull tab and the stabilizer out of some sturdy white cardstock, and then I chose some yellow cardstock for the pull tab arrow part that I will glue on top of the tab. So now let's start building this together. I'm going to fold along the score lines of my pull tab. I'm going to make sure that it fits and everything is moving and I'm happy with how my placement is. Of course, I don't really want to start over, but I'm going to make sure it's how I like it before gluing anything together. I want to make sure that I know exactly how I'm going to place the balloon. So I'm just trying to give it a good test here, and I'm pretty happy with how things are looking. I'm going to grab a scoring tool and just really try to make sure that my folds are nice and crisp and that there won't be any issues moving inside of that slot. Once that's done, I'm going to adhere my balloon to this pull tab piece. So I'm going to place it inside and make sure that the pull tab is as low as possible. And I'm going to use my Heffy tape again just to keep that in place while I do my gluing. So now I'm just making sure that the balloon is as low as possible before seeing the top of the pull tab slot. I'm going to use my glue, and then I'm going to place my balloon on top of that. Again, trying to center as best as I can. It's not perfect, but it still looks really cute. Once I have it in place, I'm going to add some pressure. I use a clear block, and I've actually kind of fast forwarded this a little bit, but once it's dry, I'm going to test it and make sure it's moving. And it is, it's so cute. I'm happy with it, so we can continue moving on. I'm going to add the stabilizer piece. I'm just folding again along those score lines, and then I will use my glue to attach it to the back side of my background. I'm going to slide it around that pull tab piece and make sure it's glued in between the top notch as well as the slot, and then keeping my stabilizer, or stabilizing my pull tab piece and keeping it in the middle as much as possible. I'm going to add a little more glue and close that up, and same like I did on the front, I'm going to apply pressure. I'm going to use some Heffy tape this time to keep it closed, and then once it's dry, I pulled it up, and now I'm pulling my pull tab, and it is keeping my pull tab center and everything is moving, so I can go ahead and cut down my pull tab. So I'm going to grab my yellow piece. I'm going to see where the score is along the pull tab, and I'm just going to create some small cuts to where I need to trim it down. So I'm using that score line in that arrow die cut to figure out where exactly I need to trim my pull tab piece, because it's extra long. That way you can find the perfect spot for it anywhere on your Slimline card. And then once that's trimmed down, I will use my glue to attach this yellow arrow piece. This will let the card receiver know that they're supposed to pull something up, and that way they know that the card is interactive. So once that is glued down, I will say that I got really excited and glued this down to my card base, but I wanted to tell you now, don't do that. You need to actually do your sentiment first. So I left it in the order I did it, but you need to flip this part. You should wait until after you have stamped your sentiment to add it to your card base. I get pretty lucky and it turns out still pretty well, but you'll definitely have a much easier time if your card is not already popped up onto your card base to stamp your sentiment. I just used some of my Heffy foam tape to attach this to a card base. This is a Slimline card base cut and scored, so that is 3.5 by 8.5, and I adhered that down and made sure everything was moving, and it looks really great, and I'm super happy. I'm going to use a sentiment from the Fluffy Puffy Unicorns clear stamps because there is one that fits perfectly behind that basket. It says believe in yourself. So I am going to figure out where I need to stamp this so it hides behind the basket and the card receiver won't see it until they pull up the balloon. So what I did is I held the stamp just over the balloon and pulled it up, and the balloon is going to be just to the top of the stamp. I hope that made sense. That way I knew exactly where to stamp it, and I could use the basket as centering it, and I knew that it would fit behind the basket while it was in the down position. I used some Versamark and some white embossing powder and heated that down, and used a little Swiffer cloth to wipe up any excess anti-static powder. I'm going to make sure my card has a good crease in its score. And now let's take a look at how it turned out. So you can see there's no sentiment. It looks really cute. And then when you pull it up, the sentiment reveals itself and it says believe in yourself. I hope you enjoyed this card tutorial and you try hiding a sentiment in your interactive cards too. Thanks for joining me today to watch this fun interactive Heffy Doodle card. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!